my name is Ravi Viswanathan. I'm really excited to have Michael Reitblat, the co-founder and CEO of Forder. We've known Forder. I've known Forder for, I think, about a decade we've been involved with. Just a little bit on our firm, NewView Capital. We're a mid-later stage growth venture secondaries firm. It was formed about 5+ years ago. It was a spin out from NEA. And super excited to have this conversation with Michael. Before we start, why don't you give a little bit of your background for the audience?
Sure. I see some people that were here in the past year, so I need to make sure that I'm telling the same story. I lived in Israel, served in the Israeli Cyber Command, did some cybersecurity startups early on, and then joined as head of product for a company called Fraud Sciences that for some of you may have read the Startup Nation book. It's the first company they talk about in the beginning. This really kind of exemplifies the entire process. We were acquired by PayPal. I tried to quit the first day. They convinced me to stay a little, but then we finally left with a few people and started Forder to really solve it. And we'll talk about what it means for the entire kind of ecosystem or entire world, rather than let's just solve it for PayPal's internal payment problems.
That's great. So that's a good jumping off point for fraud management. So you talked about fraud science. I mean, you've been living this field for, what, 15 years? Mm-hmm. So I'd love for you to maybe walk us through just the history and vision of your experience with the fraud management. Maybe it's V1.0 with Fraud Sciences to where you are with Forder. I think that'd be really interesting.
Sure. So I'm not sure how many people here know that if fraud happens, right, if somebody pickpockets you, takes your credit card, walks into a store, buys something, you call the bank, you get your money, and then the bank eats the loss. If it happens digitally, so if instead of pickpocketing you, someone will just hack some websites, which sometimes happens, and take your credentials to buy something online, the liability for that fraud is on the merchant, on the seller. And that forces everybody who sells something online to develop their own capabilities to distinguish who's a fraudster and who's a legitimate customer. Now, I don't know, let's say e-commerce started around 94, 95 to really take off. From that moment until 2005, it was all rule-based, very manual, and very restrictive. A lot of it, like the infrastructure of e-commerce was supporting that. So if you would have said, we never ship outside of our own domestic market, we never ship to customers who don't ship to the same address it registered in their bank, was very, very limited. Part of the innovation that Fraud Sciences did originally was to really enable people to remove a lot of these barriers, but the scale was very small, so we did it very accurately, but still manually. So we enabled some of our customers to start shipping from the US to Indonesia, which was perceived very, very risky. But the scale was about, 1,000, 2,000 transactions a day. E-commerce, 2005. Fast forward 10 years to 2015, 2013, when we're starting. It's very clear that manual won't scale anymore because now e-commerce is 10 times larger than before. You need a lot of people, but this is still, surprisingly, even to this day, there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people whose day job is looking at transactions, calling potential buyers and asking them a bunch of questions to really understand if they're committing fraud or not. And the innovation within PayPal was, how do we starting to automate this, the same approach, within the PayPal ecosystem, than maybe doing it 1 million times a day. When we started Forder, we really had 3 transformations we wanted to do. The first one is, let's leverage, well, it wasn't even called AI then. The buzzwords in that time was machine learning and big data, but it's actually the same thing, right? People use the same exact models. There's not that much innovation in that from the 60s, pretty much. It's just the compute's better, there's more data. I was telling you that I was arguing, one VC passed on our seed round because we told them we're going to use neural networks, and they told us neural networks will never work because it was tried in the 60s and it failed. Very different world 10 years ago, right? Now I'm happy that everybody's jumping on the AI train. It wasn't as obvious before, but the first one is, how do we make sure all the decisions are made automatically in sub-second, and how do we leverage AI to look at data? The second one is how do we aggregate or create a consortium of data? Because if I'm a sophisticated fraudster, and if you look in the fraud economy, which is estimated about $200 billion, they have, well, VCs, they have money, they have talent, they will invest in developing a very sophisticated fraud attacks. They'll go attack Walmart, steal $1 million, then get blocked. Then what they do is they go to Target and do the same thing. They go to Best Buy and do the same thing. They go to, I don't know, CVS and do the same thing. Because there's no data sharing between these organizations. So the second transformation we brought to market was, let's create a data consortium. Let's pull the data from all of the companies that we work with. Right? If PayPal only used PayPal data, we would use all of our customers' data together. And the third, which I would say probably the most important one, and I'm sure we'll talk about where this is going today, is instead of looking at a transaction and trying to figure out whether it's a fraudulent one, whether there are risk factors here, let's try to properly authenticate the buyer. If we know who the buyer is, and we know that they're somebody we can trust, it doesn't really matter which payment method you're using, where are you shipping to, what are you buying, and so on. So identity-based, AI-based, network-based in terms of network of data. Fast forward 10 years, it's working really well.
Yeah. So I want to double click on one thing you said. Just from the fraud sciences to the Forder evolution, obviously the several orders of magnitude scale, that's very appealing to customers. But did you have this issue where I'm sure the customer found some level of security, no pun intended, in the manual review? And once you start saying it's automated, the fidelity of that data and them actually handing over the data to you, did you have that adoption curve issue that a lot of folks have when you have to go from manual to automatic?
Yes. So a lot of our challenges early on with VCs as well is they called a bunch of companies, said, how comfortable will you be outsourcing your decisions about transaction fraud to a startup that will do it fully automated? Most of them said, it'll never happen. I actually kept track of the customers they talked to make sure that all of them are customers by today. I think I'm missing 2, but I'll get there. But to this day, you talk to some fraud teams, and they will tell you cannot do it without any manual intervention. If I can prove it in the data, this is not the case.
But part of that, sorry to interrupt, part of that is a job preservation for the fraud teams.
Sure.
Right, because if you eliminate all manual review, and a portion of their job is manual review.
Yeah,
so
I've learned the phrase here that turkeys don't vote for Thanksgiving. That goes to that point a little. But I think most of the time, we actually don't sell to the fraud teams. We sell to the heads of e-commerce, the CFO, the owners of some of the business. Right, early on when we started, we didn't start selling to Home Depot. We had to kind of earn our right there. And the thing we introduced is, which fraud sciences did pretty successfully from a business model perspective, is let's underwrite the risk of our customers. So if currently, let's say you have an acceptance rate of 95%, and 50 basis points of transactions are fraudulent, if we will guarantee at least 95% acceptance for 40 basis points of cost, and we absorb the risk, you'll take that deal, right? It's a very easy financial arbitrage. I'm not 100% sure that all the VCs understood how much risk we're taking in that model, because otherwise we couldn't have started it up. And it was a really good point for us to start acquiring data, right? AI is only the model is interesting. You need to pick the right one for the problem, but it's not very differentiated. What differentiates is the access to data. So we really needed to make sure we have a lot of it, that it's properly tagged, so clean data. I'm sure in all the sessions about AI, you hear a lot about this. And in fraud, part of the problem is if we don't have the feedback loop, if we don't know that our decision was wrong one way or another, there's no way to retrain the model. So we actually needed control over transactions, to override the fraud managers and not the other way around. So we started that model until we got to about 10 billion or so of kind of annual transaction volume, where we had more data than pretty much any other company in the space. And then we had enough proof points to show customers that this is the better approach.
Yeah. So let's switch gears. We talked about fraud management, but you also have a very interesting purview into the broader e-commerce market, right? And especially in the last few years when you had e-commerce growth during the bull market, COVID and then a COVID bump, and then a COVID retreat, and then a downturn. And so you have a lot of instability. But talk us through that and how you dealt with that, and just any observations you had of that market, and what you think where that market is going.
Sure.
Way forward.
So I always bring, well, Jamie, I think, mentioned earlier that Montgomery Summit was one of the last conferences right before COVID. I think I have a very badly aged quote in the LA Times, because they asked me if you continue coming to conferences, and I said, sure, and then the next week they announced shelter in place, no one's traveling anywhere. But if you go back to March 2020, from a Forder perspective, 25% of our business was travel. And then, I don't know, March 15th or whenever the shelter in place came in, 0% of our business was travel. Now, I know if you're a travel company, you're in bigger problems than us, but that's a lot of revenue just disappearing. We had to, luckily we raised some money just a couple months before that, so we're in good shape, but we needed to structure and find a way to extend our runway, because who knows what's gonna happen. And then somewhere around first week of April, we realized, oh, all of our e-commerce customers are selling double, and all of our grocery customers are selling 20 times more. So we actually completely overachieved our 2020 plan, built a substantially healthier 21 plan. But what we definitely saw is that transformation of people that said, I'm never gonna buy online, period, or I'm never gonna buy product of type X online. During COVID, they had no other choice. So you have to, the only way to buy stuff for most people, definitely not the most reckless one, but not necessarily, you didn't have to be paranoid to just say, I'm only shopping online. They got used to it. So you see, if you look at market penetration, so travel and tickets was probably at 50% penetration in terms of e-commerce out of everything. Now it's maybe 60. Didn't grow much because it was already very penetrated. Groceries pre-COVID was probably in the single digits, and now I would say we're at the 30, 40%. If you look at restaurants, when we started the company, no way I would have predicted that burger sales will be, I don't know how, high single digits percentage of our business, right? Because there's so many QSRs that have realized we have to have a digital experience, because COVID, no one's walking in, they just want to pay, take their food home. And then they realize that's a great offering, let's keep more of it, let's build loyalty with our customers through it. The digitization of verticals we haven't considered before, because consumers had to adapt it. And now what we're seeing, e-commerce is kind of, I don't know if relapse is the right word, but it reverts to the mean. If through COVID it went really, probably 5 years, and accelerated by about 5 years, now it stays in place, pretty stagnant, catching up to the long trend. But we see verticals, we just signed our first oil and gas company, right, gas station business, because they're digitizing too. And that market's probably, I don't know, 0.5% penetrated today, probably gonna go to the same place. And I'm not even talking about the cars buying from the pump themselves without human intervention there. Which I think actually brings me to another topic. When we started, it was detecting between good humans and bad humans, right? If our big innovation is we really need to understand who the human is, the detection is, are you a good actor or a bad actor? And then, probably a little before COVID, bots became very popular, but it was very clear that all bots are bad bots. If a bot trying to buy something, it's because fraudsters are leveraging AI too, and they're trying to, instead of doing the hard work and stealing manually, they'll automate this. But now you have a situation where you have good bots too, right? If you tell Alexa to buy something for you outside of Amazon, it generates a web session that looks exactly like a bot, but it actually is you. You will pay for it, and we need to let you through. So distinguishing between good bots and bad bots became a very interesting problem. We actually acquired a bot detection company earlier last year because of that. And that ties back to scale, because if I mentioned that at Fraud Sciences we had 1,000 transactions a day, just this morning one of our customers sold some limited edition shoe and we got to 1,000 transactions per second. Right? The scale of digital commerce, e-commerce is kind of a term that means basically retailers selling online. So if you think of any type of digital interaction with a payment in the end, they need to really know whether they can trust the consumer or not.
So that's, the human piece is a really good launching point for this whole point solution to platform. You also alluded to it. You're at the transaction stream, and then that transaction is getting done by, put aside the bots, by human, and you get into identity. By the way, point solution to platform, that's the age-old journey of every venture-backed company to go there. You guys have successfully done that. So talk a little bit about the decision points to lead you to move beyond just transactions into much more of a platform.
So I think that two things happened. We became really, really good at detecting credit card fraud. Just to give you a perspective, last year we protected about $400 billion worth of e-commerce. We helped our customers generate about $9 billion of transactions they would have previously declined. Very easy to A/B test. And we also helped them save $1.1 billion of fraud. Very easy to quantify. When we solved that problem, we noticed that there's a bunch of transactions that are happening that are not going to us. And we talked to customers like, oh yeah, these are my trusted, that fraud is happening there. These are my trusted customers as repeat customers. They already created an account, you verified them, and so I'm just letting them through. And what was happening is account takeover. So instead of going after your credit card, they will get your username and password, and I won't even embarrass people with a show of hands of who uses the same combination for everything online. And so it's very easy to monetize accounts. And so we built an account takeover product because to us, it's the same thing. We need to understand, are you the same person you claim to be or not? And at the same time, in a separate conversation with a different customer, they told us credit card transactions are great, but we're having people abusing our return policy. Right? Remember, post-COVID, proof of shipment became different, returns became easier, and for a lot of retailers, especially in the fashion space, fashion or beauty, about 40% of the purchases end up in the return. The mainstream logic is you buy 2 pairs of shoes, you see which one fits better, you return the other one, and they want to make it very convenient or safe for consumers to buy online. But people realize that they can essentially rent clothes for free. You buy online, you buy a suit, you wear it for Jamie's thing, you return it, then you go to the same store, buy something else, go to another conference, and so on. And when we analyze the data, because we know who the people are that are buying and returning, even if they use different accounts, different devices, different, payment methods, that about half of the returns are done by 1% of the people. And this is a bigger financial problem than credit card fraud, because people understand credit card fraud is a crime, they have teams, they have a bunch of ex-cops in those teams. It's a concept they grasp. The fact that they have a return abuse problem, nobody thinks about this. They measure X% of our purchases are being returned. So we built a return abuse solution. And then we realized people are abusing promotions that say, invite a friend to use my app and I'll give both of you $10. So without giving you ideas, right, you invite your other Gmail, delete cookies, install again, and now you got $20 because on both sides. And then you do it again and again because Gmails are easy to get. So we came up with a kind of promotion abuse product and so on. And what we realized is these are different people that are buying it. They're calling it by a different name. Sometimes the marketing department, the operations department for the returns, the payment people, they don't talk to each other. They don't even share the same data. Earlier, I think in one of the sessions, Jamie showed how a financial institution looks like. Retailers look complicated and antiquated and a lot of systems that are not connected. We see the same people interact over and over again. Stat that I should have probably talked about before is, at our current stage, we are familiar with 1.6 billion people. Now, these are humans. This is not a device or an email or something. We actually know it's the same person, mostly from the Western economy. So we're not in India yet. We're not in Africa, or barely. So Western buyers, some from China. And we see them on average 30 times a year, which really helps reinforce and train our AI models, because people change their digital identity slowly, but if you only see them once a year, it looks like 2 different people. So that helps us there. And the fact that we have more products connected to the same database, right, or to the same system, trains the same AI, makes all of our products stronger. So that shift to the platform, completely kind of a consumer identity platform.
But it seemed like it was an organic journey. Maybe it was you guys realizing a need in the market, finding product market fit. Maybe it was a customer pulling it, but it was this organic journey to now. You had one, now you have 6 or 8 products. Versus you woke up one day, we're going to be a platform company and introduce all these products.
I don't think it ever happens that way.
It never does.
It's organic. Now we have this, so we have a very engaged customer advisory board, and sometimes we'll get a call from them. We had this pitch from this company. We think you can do it better, so either build it or buy them. So this happens like almost monthly. So we bought one, but we'll potentially look at others, but can't buy everything.
That's a helpful customer advice.
Yes, we have really engaged customers because they know we already have their data.
Right.
We're already integrated, so it's so much easier for them to consume another capability from us, right? So you can look at what's happening with how CrowdStrike evolves their platform, how, I don't know, Shopify enables things, how Palo Alto enables things. So we're trying to replicate the same, I think pretty successfully now, replicate the same playbook.
Last question, the obligatory AI question, obviously. Wouldn't be a VC if I didn't ask that. But the different, I'd love for you, because you're right, a decade ago it was called something different, but I'd love to hear how you all have evolved, forget the nomenclature, AI into your offerings. But the other thing now that is different from back then is the market, right? Because there's a lot of other folks doing as well. So just talk about that.
It's definitely funny when some of our customers ask us, can I tell our board that we're leveraging Gen AI because we're using you? So we actually built a Gen AI product, which is now pretty cool, but we don't generate data, right? We actually use data that was already collected and process it and use AI to use the antiquated neural networks to make proper decisions. What Gen AI enabled us to do is give our customers way more insights in native language over the data we collected for them. So it's more of an insights product on top of the platform that we already have, rather than, what's interesting is fraudsters are using Gen AI because they create fake people leveraging real people's data, or they make it so much easier for them to impersonate you. There was a buzzword probably a couple years ago, even in this conference, about biometrics and how it's going to solve identity, and people don't realize that I can use AI to create each of your face or retina or fingerprints or whatever you want. So if we're using something that's static, then you can actually not replace afterwards because you can't grow a new retina. And fraudsters can replicate it easier than we're actually not solving a problem, we're creating a bigger one. But let's not talk about the usage of biometrics.
Well, I want to thank you, Michael. I was going to ask one other question. All the ways I'm a better board member than Jamie Montgomery, but that will take 5 hours for you to say all that. So with that, thanks, Michael.
Thank you.